Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to impartially analyze a profound, challenging, and honestly heavily opinionated critique of one of the absolute giants of modern psychology, Carl Jung. We're going to carefully unpack this really fascinating text, which argues that Jung's theories might actually hold a hidden moral danger.
What if the voices in your head aren't actually just your imagination? Yeah, it's a heavy question, right? But the source text we're exploring today centers entirely around this really unsettling premise. It challenges us to look closely at what actually happens when the deepest parts of our minds start talking back.
Part 1. The Depth of the Psyche. Let's kick things off by establishing exactly where Jung got it absolutely right, according to our source material. The text totally acknowledges Jung's massive, undisputed contribution to how we understand the human mind. I mean, he didn't just see us as these cold, rational calculators. He proved that we're profoundly moved by inner affections, fantasies, and dreams. He showed that the human soul isn't superficial at all. It has this incredible, undeniable depth.
But, well, here's where things get complicated. Part 2. The mystery of archetypes. This is exactly where Jung's framework starts crossing into what the critique considers pretty dangerous territory.
To really grasp this critique, we've got to look at the official Jungian definition provided by the text. Jung proposed the existence of archetypes. Now, officially, he didn't call them spirits. He described them as deep, inherited structures of the collective unconscious. Basically, they're these profound forms inherited by all of humanity that organize our entire inner world.
You've definitely heard of some of these before. The mother, the wise old man, the hero, the shadow, the anima. In clinical theory, these are just symbolic forms that passively pop up in our dreams, our myths, and religions. And hey, if we stopped right there, someone might just say, fine, it's just symbolic psychology. But the author insists it is definitely not that simple. Because, and this is what's really fascinating, these archetypes don't just sit there like passive pictures on a wall. Often, they act like autonomous forces. They speak, they guide, they seduce, and they even frighten. The author points to the famous Philemon anomaly. Jung reported having these extensive dialogues with an inner figure named Philemon. This figure acted like a master, communicating really complex ideas that Jung claimed he hadn't consciously produced himself. Jung interpreted this not as a spirit, but as a personification of his deep psyche. So, does changing the label actually solve the problem? The author of our text argues absolutely not. Think about it. In traditional religion, a voice offering advanced knowledge inside your head would be viewed as a spiritual or mediumistic entity, something external and potentially very dangerous. Jungian psychology just relabels it as a personification of the deep psyche or an autonomous image. But the concrete experience? It remains exactly the same. There's an intelligence speaking inside the soul, acting superior to the ego and demanding your attention. The critique argues that just changing the name from spirit to archetype literally does nothing to eliminate the danger.
Which brings us to part 3, the myth of wholeness. We really have to ask ourselves, what are we actually trying to achieve by talking to the deep psyche?
The text throws a major wrench into Jung's fundamental assumption that every single powerful inner manifestation is legitimate material for personal growth. The author poses this really sharp Socratic question. Just because an image surges up with power or an inner shadow appears, who said it automatically has to be integrated?
Right? And following that up, who said every inner voice is actually wise? Does every numinous, deeply fascinating figure genuinely come to heal us? The author is throwing up a huge warning flag against the dangerous assumption that the depths of our mind are purely a source of wisdom.
Now, Jung's answer to our inner turmoil is a concept called individuation. The text defines this as basically Jung's version of psychological salvation. The whole goal is to become whole by integrating the opposites of your personality. To pull this off, Jung says you've got to listen to the unconscious, interpret the symbols, and accept your dark side, your shadow.
But the critique fires back with a piercing question. Whole for what, exactly? Integrated toward what? Notice the stark contrast in ultimate goals here. Jung aims for wholeness and integration, but the critique argues the soul has to aim for goodness and moral purification. The text impartially points out a pretty glaring flaw in Jung's system. A person could theoretically be completely psychologically whole. They know their shadow, understand their symbols, chat with their inner images, and yet remain totally spiritually deformed by pride, vanity, or literally making an idol of themselves. Wholeness, the author insists, is simply not enough.
So where did this intense drive for mere wholeness even come from? That leads us to part 4, the danger of ambiguity.
The source actually traces this problem back to Eastern philosophy, specifically the concept of yin and yang, and the severe danger of applying that to human morality.
And this brilliantly illustrates the author's warning. When you start looking at reality as just an endless balance of opposites, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, and you apply that framework to morality, the very concept of evil dissolves. Evil stops being seen as evil. Just look at how the definitions shift. In a Jungian framework, envy becomes merely a shadow to be integrated. Pride is just repressed psychic energy. Sin itself becomes mere psychological material. The danger here is that terrible things are completely redefined as necessary parts of our totality.
Now, to be fair, the text makes sure to clarify that Jung isn't entirely useless here. He is highly effective at showing us our hidden flaws. Denying your dark side? That just makes you hypocritical and dangerous. It's totally vital to recognize the aggression, the vanity, the lies within us. But, and this is a massive but, the source insists, recognizing is not obeying, perceiving is not integrating. A true conscience doesn't just passively observe your dark flaws, it actively judges them according to truth and goodness.
This leads right into a remarkably powerful metaphor from the text. Jung opened a deep door to the human unconscious, sure, but he completely failed to place a strong moral guardian at that door. Because Jung hovers in this ambiguous gray zone between psychology and spirituality, his work creates a deep fascination. And fascination, the author warns, is exactly how humans stop judging. We get so enchanted by the mystery, the cool symbols, and the meaningful coincidences that we literally stop looking for truth and start just looking for signs. So, how do we fix this? The final synthesis offers a proposed solution in Part 5, the hierarchy of the soul, which is all about restoring true order to the mind. First off, we have to avoid this spiritualistic trap. The author heavily warns against treating the unconscious like some sort of unquestionable oracle. We cannot obey dreams as if they're literal divine revelations. We can't treat archetypes as spiritual masters. The psyche is not God. An inner image has zero intrinsic authority over your conscious, rational mind. And this builds directly into the author's final verdict on the correct structure of our inner life, the true hierarchy. Step 1. Conscience must illuminate reason. Step 2. Reason must then judge our affects, our emotions, and those deep unconscious images. And Step 3. The will has to actively choose the good. For the author, the unconscious can certainly influence us, but it must never, ever be allowed to govern us. Which brings this whole critique to a truly powerful resolution with this climactic quote straight from the source text. The destiny of the soul is not merely to be whole. It is to be true. It is to be purified. It is to be led to the good. Man doesn't save himself by simply integrating the darkest depths of his mind. He orders himself by looking upward. Which leaves us with this final thought. Based on the profound critique we've been unpacking today, ask yourself, when you look deep within, when you encounter your own inner voices and symbols, who is actually governing the hierarchy of your mind? Are you observing your depths, or are you serving them? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.